So in the last class, we were discussing about parotid gland and its anatomical relationships. So wherein the importance of ramus of mandible, base of skull, and mastoid, the three bony points that are important. Similarly, three cranial nerves: seventh nerve, ninth nerve, 12th nerve. Of course, these two are very deep compared to the seventh nerve, which passes through the gland, dividing the gland into superficial 80% and deep 20% lobes. So again, three muscles are in close relation to the parotid. That is masseter anteriorly, digastric posterior belly below the gland, and stylohyoid muscle that is posterior to the gland. So these are the three bony points, three nerves, and three muscles. And inside the substance of the gland, the carotid artery will divide into two. One is maxillary, going medially and anteriorly, whereas superficial temporal goes superiorly. Then accompanying this artery is the retromandibular vein. So that is formed by the corresponding veins of this artery, and there may be lymph nodes also within the gland substance, and because the gland itself is enclosed in dense deep cervical fascia, right? So this is the anatomy, this is the zygomatic process, this is the bony point of the bony ear, and then you have mastoid and anteriorly masseter muscle. This is the vein, retromandibular vein. So this is the nerve that will divide into two parts, zygomatico-temporal and cervico-facial. So inflammatory disorder, most commonest is mumps. Then you have bacterial, mainly because of obstruction, and the obstruction is mainly due to, so this is a parotitis. You can see that the lower part of the gland is mainly enlarged, so it is very easy to give an incision here, whereas if you give here near the just below the ear lobule, then you are likely to damage the nerve. So here it is not a big problem. You can give a as posterior as possible, because for cosmetic reasons you have to give a vertical incision, not horizontal incision. That is very important. So recurrent parotitis in children can be there, and xylography, you can see the snowstorm appearance. Whereas obstruction, as I already told you, mainly common in submandibular, whereas parotid also you can actually feel the stone if it is in the duct by palpating here parallel to the this zygomatic process over the masseter. You can roll the parotid duct actually. So if it is small, you can take it out by Dormia basket, whereas otherwise it may has to be broken down by ESWL or endoscopic methods. You can extract the stone. So you can have strictures and obstruction to the opening of the duct. Granulomatous is mainly tuberculous, whereas another problem that is fairly common is sialosis. It's non-inflammatory, so it is not sialadenitis. So it is seen in all metabolic conditions like diabetes, alcoholism, pregnancy, some of the drugs, then idiopathic reason. So the hamster-like appearance, bilateral parotid. So you can see here. So bilateral parotid swelling. So this is a so-called hamster's appearance. Then Sjogren's, of course, it is an autoimmune condition wherein there is destruction of both salivary and lacrimal glands. Mainly parotid gland is involved, and there is a xerostomia because of the destruction of the salivary glands, and keratoconjunctivitis sicca because of lacrimal gland destruction. So there are two varieties. One is primary, there is no disease elsewhere, and it can lead to lymphoma. Whereas secondary is seen in cases of collagen diseases and other autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, scleroderma, all these things. Common in females, 10:1 ratio, and there is lymphocytic infiltration. That's why possibility of lymphoma is to be considered. Treatment is only, that is palliative, that is you can give artificial tears, and saliva also is available, but easiest way is to drink as much as possible water. So this is the involvement of both this parotid and submandibular glands, whereas here we can see the lacrimal glands involvement in Sjogren's. So in the last class we have started tumors, but we could not complete it. So tumors are, so before we go, I will give you statistics that is very important. So the tumors of the salivary glands, first one is parotid. Very common in parotid, so it is 80%. 80% of the salivary gland tumors are seen in parotid. Whereas of this 80%, 80% are benign. In parotid, 80% of salivary tumors are benign. Whereas pleomorphic adenoma is again 80% of benign tumors of parotid or pleomorphic adenoma. So like this, you have to remember. Then you have submandibular. Not very common here. Only 15% of salivary gland tumors are seen in submandibular. Then the benign tumors are 50% only. Rest of the 50 are malignant. Of this, 90% are pleomorphic adenoma. Then you have sublingual and minor salivary glands. So only 5% of salivary tumors are seen in minor salivary glands and sublingual. Here benign are very less, only 10%, and all the benign tumors are pleomorphic adenoma. So that means pleomorphic adenoma is the commonest tumor of all salivary glands. Okay, so that frequency you have to remember, and So most common salivary tumor site for salivary gland tumors is parotid, of which 80% are benign. So the most common, that means again 80% of benign tumors are pleomorphic adenomas. And again 80% of benign tumors are seen in superficial lobe. Now you can see the importance of 80 figure in salivary glands. So how do these benign tumors present? So they will be slow growing, paleness marks below and in front of the ear. In case presentation also, you have to specify. Whenever you see a parotid tumor, you should say in the history, a painless, slow growing mass presenting below and in front of the ear. So that is the commonest presentation. The patient may have it for years together. Previously, the average was 4 to 5 years. Now that the awareness is increased, so it may be 1 to 2 years before the patient comes to you. Okay, whereas deep lobe, it may not be apparent superficially, so they may have symptoms of parapharyngeal mass, maybe having some dysphagia, like that. So, of course, classification of the salivary gland tumors. In the last class, I was actually drawing that. Then there was net problem. So, parotid tumors. So, parotid tumors can be classified as epithelial, that is gland proper. Non-epithelial. Right, epithelial again you can divide as benign and malignant. Benign and malignant. Then you have monomorphic. Monomorphic are not important for you, so don't bother about them. What is important for you is pleomorphic. So benign tumors are adenomas. Okay. Adenomas. Then malignant are again divided as low grade. So low grade tumors, they are called as examples acinic cell tumors. Then you have low grade mucoepidermoid. Mucoepidermoid carcinoma. Then you have adenoid cystic. So these are low-grade tumors. Then you have high-grade. So in high-grade, you have squamous cell. Squamous cell carcinoma. You have adenocarcinoma. You have X or carcinoma X pleomorphic. Then you have anaplastic. So these are high-grade tumors, right? Then you have again here benign. So a lipoma can come, hemangioma can come, lymphangioma can come. So these are benign, whereas corresponding malignant sarcomas, lymphoma. So if you remember this classification, so parotid tumors, epithelial, non-epithelial. Then you have epithelial benign, that is monomorphic, pleomorphic, adenomas. So benign tumors are called as adenomas. So pleomorphic adenoma is the commonest. Then you have malignant, that is low grade, high grade. Low grade, you have acidic cell tumors, mucoepidermoid carcinoma, adenoid cystic carcinoma. There is high grade squamous cell carcinoma, adenocarcinoma, carcinoma X pleomorphic. That means malignant transformation of pleomorphic adenoma is there, and that is high grade tumor. Then you have anaplastic also. There is non-epithelial. These are all common. Benign lipoma, hemangioma, lymphangioma. Whereas benign malignant sarcomas and that lymphomas are common. So this you have to remember and then reproduce, because in the exam there may be a question. Classify salivary gland tumors or classify parotid gland tumors. So unless you write that classification, you will not get the marks. Okay. So this is what is given in detail here. So adenomas, that is benign epithelial tumors, are monomorphic or pleomorphic. Monomorphic, the example you can give is Warthin's tumor, that is peculiar to parotid, right? Then carcinoma, of course, low grade, high grade. All these are there. Then non-epithelial, benign or hemangioma, lymphangioma, whereas malignant sarcomas corresponding are there. Then lymphomas. Of course, secondary parotid is a site for secondary tumors also. Local extension can occur, or as distant as bronchus carcinoma, bronchogenic carcinoma can also come into the parotid, right? So low grade are not very different from benign neoplasm. So you cannot distinguish a low grade carcinoma from pleomorphic adenoma. Only the pathologist will tell you after FNAC. Whereas high grade, the difference is they are either diffuse or discrete hard mass. Whereas parotid, it is a pleomorphic adenoma. Typically, it is variable in consistency, that is rubbery. consistency may be there, even cystic mass say areas may be there. Whereas malignancy, it is mainly hard consistency. Of course, the mucoepidermoid carcinoma, either low grade or high grade, is the most common in parotid, whereas in submandibular, I told you in the last class what variety is common. Submandibular. Of all the malignancies, which carcinoma is common in submandibular salivary gland tumor? Yes? Anybody? I told you in the last class about submandibular salivary gland. So all of you have forgotten, no problem. The answer is below only. Yeah. Yes. No. I asked about malignancy. You have answered for benign, whereas in submandibular salivary gland, the commonest malignancy is adenoid cystic. So, what is the peculiarity of this adenoid cystic? It is has a tendency for perineural invasion. That's why in parotid, facial nerve involvement, if it is there, you have to suspect adenoid. Early facial nerve involvement, if it is there, you have to suspect adenoid cystic. And it can spread even to the lungs. Metastatic potential is high for adenoid cystic, though it is benign. So, what are the symptoms and signs of malignancy? This is very, very important both clinically and in theory also. So, clinically, suppose there is a case is given for you, parotid malignancy, then you have to ask, is there any rapid enlargement of the swelling? That is the first symptom. Either to slow growing, but suddenly started increasing rapidly. That is the typical symptom of malignancy of parotid. Then there may be pain also. If there is pain, means it is malignant. That is the unless it is you have excluded parotitis. In a tumor, if there is pain, it is malignant, right? Then, as I already told you, hard inconsistency and it is immobile. Whereas a pleomorphic adenoma is easily mobile. Here it is immobile. If there is facial nerve palsy, maybe even paresis also, it is malignant. It cannot be benign. So a swelling, previously no facial palsy, now there is facial palsy, means it is malignant transformation of pleomorphic adenoma. So that you have to remember. Overlying skin involvement. So there may be induration or even ulceration in late cases. So that is malignant. If there are lymph nodes, it is malignant. Extension to surrounding structures like the temporomandibular joint, base of skull, if it is extending, means it is malignant. So you have to remember all these symptoms and signs. So rapid enlargement, pain, hard consistency, immobility, facial nerve palsy, induration or ulceration of the overlying skin, lymph node enlargement, the extension to surrounding structures. So these are the symptoms and signs of malignancy. So what are the investigations? So investigations after clinical, you have to confirm that it is because in the parotid region, you do not know whether it is lymph node or parotid gland or the surrounding muscle or subcutaneous tissue. So you do not know it is coming from parotid or not. You may not be that perfect in clinical examination. So you have to confirm the organ by ultrasound. And you have to do FNAC. Ultrasound guided FNAC is best. So Once the pathology is seen, if it is benign, there is no need for CT or MRI unless it is from the deep lobe. If it is in the superficial lobe and benign, no need of CT or MRI. Whereas if it is in the deep lobe and of suspicious pathology, pathologist says, I cannot tell you exactly what it is. Then, and also there is, if pathology says it is malignant, then you have to go for CT and MRI. Of late, MRI is done because it clearly depicts the soft tissues. So usually we don't do any needle biopsy or open biopsy unless the overlying skin is ulcerated and CT says that it is inoperable. For you to give radiotherapy and chemotherapy, you need tissue diagnosis. Otherwise, they won't give. Radiotherapists don't give this radiation to a benign condition. So in those cases, you can do open biopsy. But otherwise, it is strictly contraindicated. Only FNAC is the way of knowing the tissue diagnosis. So before I go for the treatment, one variety of, so clinically, of course, in the clinical posting, you will be told about the clinical features of pleomorphic adenoma, and there is another tumor that is called as Warthin's tumor. What is this Warthin's tumor? It is a monomorphic adenoma. There are other varieties of monomorphic adenoma, but Warthin's is where you see it is only in parotid. Nowhere else Warthin's tumor is seen, and it is seen most frequently in males and also seen exclusively in smokers. That's why it is called as so it is also called as smoker's tumor. So this is one benign tumor which is seen in smokers. So that is the peculiarity, and contrary to the pleomorphic adenoma, which I told you is variable appearance, variable consistency, and vacillated appearance, whereas Warthin's tumor, it is smooth and consistency may be even cystic. So that is the difference between Warthin's and pleomorphic adenoma, whereas Warthin's will never undergo malignant transformation, whereas pleomorphic adenoma can undergo malignant transformation. These are the differences. But in the treatment, it is all same, irrespective whether it is benign or a low-grade malignancy. So for the benign tumors, you have to do what is called a superficial conservative parotidectomy. What does this mean? Superficial is you remove the superficial lobe only. Conservative, you conserve the facial nerve. So you will dissect the facial nerve, that's all, away from the tumor. So you don't remove or injure the facial nerve. So superficial means superficial lobe, conservative means conserving the facial nerve, and parotidectomy is self-exfoliatory, removing the parotid gland. So this is exclusively done in all benign tumors. Whereas there is other surgery, that is total. Instead of superficial, here it is total. Total means both superficial and deep lobe are removed. Though whether deep lobe is involved or not, you will remove deep lobe. So conservative is again you conserve the facial nerve and remove the gland below the facial nerve. I told you facial nerve will split the gland into both superficial and deep lobe, whereas superficial capsulectomy is you will remove. So this is the superficial lobe, this is the facial nerve, this is the deep lobe. So in superficial peripectomy, you will remove only this. So that is superficial conservative peripectomy. Whereas in total conservative peripectomy, you will remove this also. Whereas keep that nerve intact. So that is superficial and total conservative peripectomy. What are the indications for total conservative? That means you remove both lobes. Or if the tumor is in the deep lobe. So if the tumor is here, you have to remove deep lobe also. Simply removing superficial lobe is not enough. Similarly, recurrent tumors, already you have done superficial peripectomy, but the tumor has again come. So the tumor has again come. So, but still it is benign only. Then what you have to do is again do both lobes you have to remove. So any recurrent. Then low grade carcinomas. Like I told you, acinic cell, low grade mucoepidermoid, adenoid cystic. You have to do, if facial nerve is not involved, a total conservative periodontectomy. Why in parotid, particularly in pleomorphic adenoma, there may be recurrence? Can anybody tell me? You are all pathology pass. I believe you might have got one or two of you might have got even distinction also in pathology, whether deserved or not, I don't know. So can you tell me why there may be recurrence in pleomorphic adenoma? Yes? Anybody? Spillage of tumor. Why there is spillage 108? You said it is spillage of tumor. Why there is spillage when you have done a superficial conservative periodontectomy? So, this is the superficial lobe, this is the tumor. And you have removed this. That's why to prevent spillage only, we are doing superficial conservative periodontectomy. So you are partly correct, but reason you should tell me. Yeah, incomplete 7037. You say it is incomplete resection. What is the reason incomplete? Why it is incomplete? That is the question. Is that only? Why it is incomplete? What is the peculiarity? I am giving you a tip. What is the peculiarity of pleomorphic adenoma? Usually benign tumors are Yeah, good. 7.3 capsular penetration. So I'll tell you now. Once you have some idea, so benign tumors are usually benign tumors are usually well encapsulated. Usually well encapsulated. You take fibroadenoma or lipoma, they are all well encapsulated. Whereas in pleomorphic adenoma, the tumor, of course, this is not macroscopic as I have depicted, it is microscopic extension of the tumor. They are called as like a pseudopods, as in amoeba, pseudopod. There may be pores in the capsule of the tumor. There is extension, microscopic extension into the tumor. Then there is, you may remove only this portion. So you may remove this portion, leaving these pseudopods intact. And they will grow into tumor again. So again tumor may be there. So that's why superficial conservative parotidectomy is devised, though it is a much bigger amount of tissue are removing, but still it is necessary because to prevent the recurrence of the tumor. And when do you do radical parotidectomy? That means you don't bother about any structure. Even facial nerve also you don't bother, suppose it is involved. And if it is necessary to remove facial nerve, without removing it, you are compromised. So the malignant tumor is like this. This is superficial lobe, this is deep lobe, and facial nerve is either involved or densely within the tumor, and you are unable to separate it. Then you have to knock off this en bloc resection you have to do. That is called as radical parotidectomy. Along radical parotidectomy, along with the mass, you have to remove the other structures. Say it is masseter muscle is involved, remove it. So like that, lymph nodes are involved. Lymph nodes, actually you are supposed to do the upper lymph nodal levels block dissection. So neck dissection you are supposed to do. So for high grade tumors, you do radical. So three types of surgery. One is superficial conservative, total conservative, and radical parotidectomies. These are the three varieties of surgeries. Then there is, of course, of late, instead of superficial conservative parotidectomy, they are doing what is called as extracapsular dissection. So they are not doing complete superficial conservative parotidectomy. It is extracapsular dissection where you will just see the nerve. You won't dissect the nerve also. And so this is done to prevent one complication. I will tell you later what's that complication. So this is the newer one. Instead of superficial conservative parotidectomy, you can do what is called as extracapsular dissection of the benign tumor only. This is for only benign tumor in the place of superficial conservative. More than that, I don't think you need. Okay. So, how to localize facial nerve? So, what are the techniques? So, either you identify the trunk first, that is called as antegrade technique. So you will identify the trunk here, just below the ear lobule. That is antegrade technique. So the trunk is quite deep. Unless you are careful, you may injure it. So what are the points or localizing points that are there? Actually, there is a Conley's pointer, so otherwise called as tragal pointer. So this is the tragus. Below that there is the cartilaginous canal of the ear is there. You are now more familiar with this. So triangular portion of the cartilaginous canal is there. So 1 centimeter deeper to it. So that is the, so the triangular cartilage is here. So triangular cartilage below this is 1 centimeter deeper is the nerve trunk like this. Then the second one is upper border of the posterior belly of digastric. You know, posterior belly of digastric will be like this. So that is anterior, of course. So this is the posterior belly of digastric muscle. So then you have styloid muscle also here, of course. Then you have styloid process that is here like this. Then you have mastoid process here like this. So these are the points where you have to search. So this is the mastoid. This is the triangular portion of the cartilaginous canal. Styloid process, digastric posterior belly. So these are the important landmarks. There you have to search for the trunk, narrow trunk. So once the trunk is located, then you can dissect superficial to the trunk like this. So suppose this is the trunk. Superficially I will dissect over the trunk, how it branches, its branches then further. So that's how we can detect. That is called as antegrade technique. Whereas sometimes you may have to do, particularly when you are doing for a recurrent surgery or after radiotherapy is given beforehand, then you have to go retrograde. That is, so you have to identify like this. You identify the branches, then go backwards. So that is retrograde. Usually we don't do this unless in a recurrent case. Usually we prefer this. So these points are very, very important. In the exam also they will ask you. So Conley's pointer is very, very important. This is also asked in entrance also. So what is this Conley's pointer? Okay. Then what are the complications of parotid gland surgery? So for any surgery, of course, you know, bleeding. Bleeding will lead to hematoma formation and infection afterwards. After 4 or 5 days, there may be infection. So these are common for any surgery. Whereas peculiar to parotid are deformity. So if you give improper scar, then there will be an ugly scar will be there. And because you have removed the gland in the retromandibular region, there may be hollowing. So here gland is there, that's why it is full. But if you remove, there will be a ugly depression here. So that is the what is the deformity. Now anybody knows what is the incision we have to give for parotid surgery? Anybody? What is the shape of incision? Of course, I told you, you have to give a preauricular incision, but what is the shape of that incision? Is there any name for it? Yes. Yeah, 7-3 you have answered for another disease. Blair's incision, you are correct for parotid abscess. So, so Blair's is for parotid abscess, whereas, yeah, 108, you are correct. Lazy S, cervicomastoid facial. Huh? Yeah, correct. You are correct. 3-7 also you are correct. So, suppose this is ear lobule and this is tragus. We have to give, and of course this is mandible. Let us say this is the mastoid process. So what you have to give is like this. It should start preauricularly, then go posteriorly over the mastoid, and then come parallel to the mandible. There should be a difference of 2 centimeters to prevent injury to one nerve. So it is a lazy S. You don't give this much. So this is the incision. It is called as lazy S. So the name also starts with S only. So it is Sistrunx incision. Sistrunx. So where else you have heard about this Sistrunx? Sistrunx, you have heard it somewhere else also. What is that? Anybody? Yeah, thyroglossal cyst, correct. So 108, you are correct. Thyroglossal cyst excision is called as Sistrunx operation. Right. So lazy as incision we give to prevent ugly scar. If you give anteriorly like this, it will be very ugly. We should never give like that. Of course, facial nerve weakness. This is the dreaded complication of any parotid surgery. So you may be sued if you injure the facial nerve. That's why pre-operatively you have to inform them. So pre-operatively you have to tell them that there is likelihood of injuring at least temporarily the facial nerve. You will tell them that I will try to prevent at any cost the facial nerve injury, but sometimes there may be chance of at least temporary injury, if not permanent. So temporary injury will just like a Bell's palsy, it may be relieved in few weeks time, 3 to 6 weeks time, with exercises and all. Whereas permanent, of course, in malignancy, you will purposefully remove sometimes in radical perpetectomy. So that is a complication. For that, you need so many things, which in your final year we will discuss. Right now, it's not necessary for you. Of course, because the face and earlobe are nearby and they are supplied by the nerves which you are going to cut. So there may be numbness also. But another dreaded complication is Fraze syndrome. And of course, xylosine, only collection of saliva. So what is this Fraze syndrome? So Fraze syndrome is also called as gustatory sweating. What will happen? So sweating and erythema, that is flushing over the region, that means here in this region, by mere smell or taste of food. So that means what has happened, the nerves that are supplying the thyroid gland have got abnormally regenerated, and then they are going into the, so Parotid is supplied by the parasympathetic nerves. So these are inappropriate regeneration of the postganglionic parasympathetic fibers through auriculotemporal nerve. They will be cut when you remove the parotid gland. So in trying to regenerate, instead of, because there is no parotid gland now, they will be regenerating and going into the sympathetic fibers that are open there. Sympathetic fibers supplying the skin, or they get innervated with postganglionic parasympathetic nerves. So that's the problem. So aberrant stimulation of overlying skin sweat glands. So instead of the parotid, which is not there now, sweat glands are which are actually supplied by sympathetic nerves. They will be stimulated and there will be sweating. So if you put a starch in paper or this one solution, then it will turn into the color, blue color. So that is the test, simple test. So in this regard, just can anybody tell me how this parotid gland is supplied? What is the nerve supply of parotid gland? Secretomotor. From which cranial nerve it will come? This is very complicated supply this parotid is having. So this auriculotemporal nerve is a branch of which nerve? Yeah. So auricular, yes, ninth cranial nerve, very good, correct. 3-7, 108. Mandibular is, yeah, you might have answered my second question. 7-3 also glossopharyngeal nerve. So salivary gland, parotid is supplied by glossopharyngeal. But how come? As one candidate said, it has gone into the auriculotemporal nerve, which is a branch of mandibular nerve of trigeminal. Okay. So how it is going means from glossopharyngeal it will reach otic ganglion. From otic ganglion, fibers will be reaching the auriculotemporal nerve. So auriculotemporal nerve will be supplying in this region, preauricular. So the name itself is auriculotemporal. So it will be like this. So there is while supplying the sensations, it will also supply secretomotor. So it is actually ninth nerve that is supplying the secretomotor. Whereas for submandibular and sublingual, it is the facial nerve through chorda tympani. So similar sounding nerves are there. So you should not get confused. So here facial nerve is auriculotemporal. So that's why it is also called as auriculotemporal nerve syndrome or gustatory syndrome phrase. So the treatment is actually prevention. You nowadays with this extra capsular dissection, I already told you this, you won't cut the nerve. So you are outside this one, so you won't cut the nerve. And it is grossly prevented with this nerve, with this dissection. Sometimes, of course, people will leave between skin and the parotid gland fossa, some artificial membranes or sternamastoid flap or temporalis facial flap, they will keep here before they close the skin. So that is prevention. Whereas once it is there means you have to give antiperspirants. Aluminum chloride paste is also works well. And if it comes, you there are surgeries, but nowadays they are doing this giving botulinum toxin injection also, though it is temporary, it can be of much use. So prevention is better than cure in these patients gustatory sweating. Okay, thank you. Now if you have any doubts, we will try to clarify, or So with this, salivary gland tumors are over. Next class will be taken by somebody else, some other topic. Okay. So if you don't have any doubts, you can, but one thing is this is very important topic, particularly the parotid gland. So you may get in the exam both clinical and theory parotid gland tumors or complications of parotid gland surgery may be given as short notes, and gustatory sweating or Frey syndrome as 2 mark question in the exam. So you should be prepared for that, right? Okay, thank you.